we did some research out recently which was partly misconstrued in that we didn't say we're at a bottom, but I think the indicators that we've had the last few months suggest that the pace of decline is slowing. We're definitely still shrinking, but that pace has slowed. I do think we'll reach that floor, as I said, perhaps as early as the first quarter of next year. After that, again, I definitely would have been more pessimistic maybe 4 or 5 months ago on what happens afterwards. It's been mentioned by a couple of the other contributors already. I mean, when you look at Ireland, we've definitely lost a lot of ground over the last, really from 2002 onwards. We were actually in a great position if you just stopped the economy in 2001. Our wages versus Europe were below the average. We'd always had pretty high productivity, but even household debt and those sort of things hadn't got out of control. But since then, it's very difficult to estimate how much ground we've lost, but take something like the real exchange rate, you can say 25%. You look at wages and unit labour costs, perhaps something less. So we needed to get back that ground, and I think we've been doing it. And what hasn't been reported is not only have wages been declining, albeit we don't have great figures on it, but productivity, I think, has picked up. And it's something that we may well come back to later, but probably isn't recognised too well. That even in the bad days of the last 4 or 5 years, when we were shifting so many resources to construction, productivity in the rest of the economy held up very well. So that would make you encouraged about the future. So I think there's more chance of us doing a Finland and recovering more quickly than there was. An economy like that grew for 3-4% for a couple of years after it bottomed, and then got up to a 5-6% growth rate. I'm not sure we'll get quite that far. If you look at Ireland now, our demographics beyond 2011 aren't fantastic. We had our baby boom in the early 80s, and the benefits of that have faded. We have another baby boom now, so we look good from 2020 onwards. But beyond that, you're not going to get massive labour force growth here, and you might get 1% or so. If we can get productivity to grow to 2%, 3% growth rate is quite reasonable. And I think that there's more chance of getting a little bit more rapid growth over a couple of years to close that gap, and then perhaps settle at that kind of growth rate in the future.
Thanks, Rosa. Marco, you were quoted in the paper today, I see.
I was.
Does that have any bearing on the view you're going to share with us now?
Perhaps, I suppose so, yes. I wish I could be optimistic. Let me start. As the only non-national here on the panel, I love your country. And I hope things will get better from here. My job as a bond manager is to listen to the likes of Ross all day long and their interpretation of what the economic situation is going to be going forward. Basically, it's alphabet soup. What I mean is the best case scenario is a V-shaped recovery where globally the economy will pick up relatively steadily and things go basically back to normal relatively soon. I think that's hopelessly optimistic. It's perhaps what a lot of people in the market are hoping for, but a W recovery, as in a small bounce before we see a decline again, seems a much more likely scenario. Unfortunately, I don't even share that view for Ireland in particular. I think it's going to be an L-shaped economic growth path going forward. Simply, one of the main things in my mind is that the huge liabilities that the Irish government has taken upon themselves by guaranteeing all the banks and further, as we will touch upon further on, further liabilities that they are about to take on, that all needs to be funded. It can be funded by taxes, it can be funded by cutting and spending, but ultimately the interest bill for the taxpayer is going to be huge for the future. And as a consequence, the question, the funding requirement is going to be huge. Who is going to buy that? Coming on the article that was published today, international investors are very reluctant to buy Irish debt at this point in time. Who's been buying it over the past? I would say the majority has been Irish banks, domestic banks. Why? Because they can fund it cheaply with the ECB. The ECB is on this, providing as much liquidity as possible to the world, to the European Union at least. And but that's going to stop at one point. What will happen if Germany and France start to recover properly, say first half of next year, and the ECB decides to increase rates and tighten the liquidity tap? I think Ireland will have a serious problem there. So I wish I could share optimism of Rossa, but I'm afraid I don't fully do so.
It's getting home sitting here beside this man. Could I come in there for a second, Ronan? And I just wanted to revert to something that Ross said when he mentioned Finland and the Nordic recovery experience. My own personal view is that there is absolutely zero chance of us replicating what happened in the Nordic countries for two reasons. Number one is that, be it both Finland and Sweden, that to restore their competitiveness, they had major currency devaluation, something which is not open to us. So our restoration of competitiveness must come through wages. And secondly, is they were able to ride on the coattails of a decent global expansion in the 1990s, which is not going to happen here, because the American consumer, which has been the engine of world growth for so long, is now in the middle of deleveraging, and the behaviour is basically not going to return to the have now, pay later ways of the 1990s and into the 21st century. So just wanted to bring that out.
Terry, just view on the particularly the financial services sector. I think we do have a very good base here, and we need to maintain that. But I think one of the problems we have is that our reputation has taken a severe knocking. Particularly, I know personally from travelling to meetings in Brussels, that people obviously who are reading about other countries only read the headlines, and the headlines tend to be quite negative. But I know sometimes I arrive into a meeting room and people look around and they're surprised that planes are still flying out of Ireland, because that's the impression they've got. And I think we are going to, if we want to continue to have a vibrant financial services sector, we're going to have to work very hard to restore our credibility. And I think that's quite important. On the economy, I'm not paid to make predictions. I think it's very clear we're going to have a very difficult number of years ahead, and I think just the question is how long or how big that number will be and how many years it will last.
Sean Brosnan asked the question.
Unfortunately, I tend to agree with Charlie and Marco. I think we're in the middle of global deleveraging that will take 3, 5, 7 years to fully unfold, led by the US. Unfortunately, we got on top of the cycle and went way ahead, and we're corrected for that now. I think historically we could have used currency depreciation to reinflate the economy. That's going to happen now. So we need to tackle our cost base, as Charlie mentioned, our public sector cost base particularly. And there's going to be a huge supply of housing in the next 3 or 4 years that will cap consumer wealth. And I think we really are, I would posit that we're largely our trajectory, economic growth trajectory, is probably in the hands of the global economy. And my perspective there is kind of an L-shaped recovery.
So that's the economy, and a number of you, a majority of you, including yourself, Sean, would be definitely on the gloomy side for the economy. What about teasing out the implications a little bit for the financial services sector in that gloomy environment, or even in your more favourable environment, Rossa?
Well, I haven't really been accused of being bullish too much over the last 6 to 12 months. It's nice to be the bull on the panel at this moment. I think it's. I just would caution briefly before I go on to that. I said the chances certainly of us enjoying or doing a Finland are higher than now, but it's a very fine balance between that L shape and the Finnish thing. I think maybe Finland is a template. Just on Charlie's point, yes, of course there was the exchange rate, the fact that they could use their exchange rate to give them a competitive boost. But I think we failed to just. I think we focus on wages a lot here. Productivity is probably one factor that isn't well captured and may just make us, perhaps that little bit more competitive than people think. Just in terms of the financial services sector, I think there are two ways. There's a split between, say, the IFSC or you might say the foreign loan component and the rest. Now, if you look at the financial services, about 85,000 people, about 60,000 are outside, you might say, that foreign-owned sector, and let's call it probably the wrong name to use, the 25,000 in IFSC related. You might say treasury and fund management and fund administration. I think that sector actually has got a lot of bad press over the last 6 to 12 months, that it's going to struggle for some time. I think there are two areas where we have an advantage. One is on tax, and one is the fact that we're English speaking. They're pretty clear. A third one probably is our labour supply, which is we've the second highest number of graduates in the 25 to 34 age group in the EU. Okay, you can question, and we all, in a forum like today may not be the best place to